Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. As usual, this is Adi. I have with me someone who did a little bit of an interesting show with me last week, where we spoke about Chinese influence within India. Of course, a lot can be talked about with regards to Chinese influence and what's happening here, what's happening there, how they do this and how they do that. But of course, we need to understand the bigger picture of what is the game, where all have the Chinese actually gone inside our system. In the last talk, and I have with me Mr. NC Bipindra, who's actually an advocate by profession, but has done a very detailed, intricate study with regards to this whole Chinese operation within India. Some of the stuff that he said last time has stuck with me. As a matter of fact, especially with regards to the media space, considering what's happening with us with BBC. Sir, good evening and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adi. Thank you. I'm pretty happy to be with you and with your audience once again to talk about the Chinese influence operations in India.
Thank you, sir. Sir, we last time we spoke about Bollywood. We spoke about the entertainment part of it. We spoke about engagements with think tanks and stuff like that. We spoke about academia. We spoke about media to a certain extent. You gave us some very good insights with regards to the names of times and stuff like that, which was very interesting, as a matter of fact. And I did some digging to have a revelation of my own. So I'd like to thank you first and foremost for that. And I want to take you up on the media question, sir, to begin this conversation. We recently see a smear campaign sort of a thing happening, and when I say this, it's not really targeted at the prime minister. It's also a lot of people have misunderstood this whole BBC campaign. It is not targeted individually at the prime minister. It's targeted at India, showcasing India as an intolerant space, showcasing India as a place where you might not be safe if you put in your investments. Please understand, this is a larger narrative. In India, we have this problem of getting stuck with the tactics of it. What exactly was said? Who said it? Where? But we forget the bigger game that is being played. Your comments on this, sir?
Yeah, I mean, leave out the political angle to it. Let us look at the strategic angle. So the
Yes, sir.
strategic angle is that this is coming 20 years after what had happened in Gujarat, and, and some sort of a closure happening with the Supreme Court of India, deliberating on it and giving out a finding through a special investigation team that it set up. After all that had happened, we thought there was some kind of a closure in the matter. But the timing of it is somewhat a little bit, surprising, and it's come as a surprise that BBC would do such a thing. In fact, it is getting discredited by doing such a hit job, sort of a thing that it has done. See, let us look at the strategic space. What is happening at this point in time? At this point in time, a lot of the global companies are shifting their manufacturing bases to nations outside China, and there are, uh, they want to look at places where there is a lot of peace, there is not much of a problem. They want to look at Vietnam, they want to look at Indian market to set up the manufacturing base and stuff like that. And there are a lot of India is one of the brighter spot in the entire economic scenario globally today.
Mm.
So when that is the situation, what is the impact of this BBC event? It's going to hit India very badly. Not only that, if this particular documentary triggers a religious divide in India in some sort of a, if there is a violent reaction from so-called the second largest minority in the country, the second largest majority in the country. I want to describe them like that. If the second largest majority in the country turn violent at some point in time, if there are we have witnessed street fights, all over the nation, where there have been riots, where they have been rioting by one set of people, and all that. So the peace in the country is completely damaged. So the religious divide is so strong that it will become very difficult to recover from the kind of impact that it has. So already some political comments have come that there is one spark that is required to trigger a huge, massive protest in India, some kind of a social disorder, or some sort of a civil war sort of a thing. That is, the comments have been made before political leaders. So is it something like that? Is it something towards that? So these are all the questions that have been in my mind since this BBC documentary came out. I mean, they can target one individual. I don't care about them targeting an individual. But what is the impact that it would have? Politically, you target anybody, whatever you want, they will give you a political response. All that will happen. So they will also give you a political response. So, but the point is, what is going to happen to the nation? So that is the kind of question that cropped up in my mind. What is going to happen to the investment atmosphere that is prevalent in the country? So when India is doing very well economically compared to all other nations, and the kind of COVID situation that has hit China hard. So I in fact call it as a reaping what you had sown earlier. What China had sown globally, it's coming back to hit them hard again. So when that is the scenario, what is the BBC? Who's kind of triggering this kind of a documentary after 20 years after some sort of a closure had happened? So these are questions that are there in my mind. We need to explore who's behind it, who's funding it, who's sponsoring this. These are all some of the questions. There are a lot of people who don't want to see India as a rising superpower. So all those people will have vested interest in ensuring that this kind of a documentary hits India hard. And we already see that there are a lot of people trying to trigger this communal divide in India by screening these documentaries in campuses, universities, and stuff like that. So there is a effort to uh, disturb the peace that exists in the country, to make investors run away from here, thinking that this is a unsafe place to put their investments in. If there is social interest, obviously the investors are going to run away. So there is also one other hit job that has happened on the economic space. Maybe we can talk about it sometime later. The markets have crashed for a particular company.
These are hit jobs, and these things will be kind of prevalent as we grow. We need to actually, as Indians, understand that these kind of things will happen more often, because there will be prying eyes, and the righteousness that India wants to put across may not be palatable to everybody. And let me just say that very, very simply, that a lot of people might say, yeah, don't do this. So there's probably a backlash from that, sir. uh, I want to talk about you know the I want to get into the intelligence, sir. I actually wanted to ask you about tech, but this thing, let's just flow the conversation, because there's a lot to do with the intelligence game within the country. We've recently seen a lot of spies getting arrested. Actually, we've seen more Chinese spies getting arrested rather than Pakistanis. And we've
Yeah.
also had, sadly, Indian citizens also. Now, this is something that will happen. It's war. People will get paid off. It happens on all the sides. I'm sure we have our guys over there as well. And let's not talk about that, because that needs to be kept under wraps. What I want to talk about is, sir, the intelligence infiltration. Now, when I say intelligence infiltration, sir, do you really mean an official spy game, or is it an overt intelligence infiltration through the means of money, through the means of favors, and so on and so forth? How do you kind of position this game, sir?
See, when you talk about intelligence operatives, doing some work in India, the Chinese intelligence operatives, they do both overt and covert. See, all nations post their intelligence guys in the embassies. So they are there to gather intelligence. Every nation does that. It is part of their diplomatic work that they do. Uh, but the kind of extent of influence that the Chinese have gathered over the years is what is so uh, appalling. Actually, it's in a I we in our report we have covered about nine sectors where this kind of a influence operation has happened. So if somebody had gone through the newspapers, as you rightly pointed out, a lot of agents are being arrested at this point in time, throughout the country. So you find that operations are happening in some certain important cities like Hyderabad. Hyderabad is one key target area where there is a lot of Chinese influence operation. Why? We need to explore that. Tamil Nadu, Chennai is one place where very serious intelligence work is happening by the Chinese. Why? We need to look at it very much more in a microscopic manner. We need to look at it, and probably there will be some trends that will emerge out of it. So once we start digging into why these kind of operators are being arrested there, it means there is a wide network that's already existing in these states. Probably they look at some kind of a easy target where they can influence those states into taking up an anti-India stand, secessionist movement, something of that sort. So that could be that angle where because of which these Chinese intelligence operators are working in these states. Very selective states they have started focusing on, and they've started, and from that is the place where the arrests are also happening. So if you had read, I mean, if you had closely watched, there was this journalist Rajiv Sharma was arrested. So his arrest happened in while he was taking money from some Chinese agents, and the Chinese agents basically were paying him off through a locally created company which had Chinese investments in it. If you closely watch that, you will know that sort of a thing has been happening. So apart from that, what are they doing? They're closely watching the movements, the activities of very important personalities in India to try and see if they can influence them in some manner. So they're closely watching, they're closely targeting them. Maybe they're closely what you call monitoring movements, speeches, their activities, what is happening. Several Supreme Court judges are in that list of people whom they are watching. So there are a lot of businessmen whom they are watching, closely watching. There are a lot of journalists, there are a lot of politicians whom they are closely watching. There are government, IAS officers and IFS officers whom they are closely watching. So these kind of, why they were doing it, probably we can't, guess why they are doing it. For the simple reason that what is the motive behind monitoring these people? Are they targets in some manner, or are they looking at them as possible influence candidates to be influenced by the Chinese? So this sort of a thing is happening already, in terms of intelligence work that they're doing, and they're also cultivating, a lot of people who are quite vocal anti-India sentiments. Who come up with, they're getting in touch with them. They're maybe paying money to them. There are a lot of civil organizations that are getting money. So, and probably they will even try to uh, trigger protests. This sort of a possibility is there when the intelligence operatives start influencing people through money, through various other allurements, basically. So somebody has a weakness for women, so they are provided with women. Somebody has a weakness for money, they are provided with money. Somebody has a weakness for wine, so they're provided with wine. So this kind of they use all methods possible to touch upon the weakness of a person to trap him. Honey traps happen. So this kind of targeting is happening at this point in time, and a lot of people might have fallen prey already in this regard. I believe, I suspect that this would have happened already in a greater manner. I have not covered it in my report, but there is something that we are working on. Maybe we'll come out with something else very soon in this regard. Similarly, you know we talked about, we are going to talk about the tech industry also. If you look at the tech industry, or influence operations in tech industry, if you look at it, they are you know investing money in very critical infrastructure sectors. Okay, so
Telecom.
the data that you, no, not just telecom, even in hardcore physical infrastructure sectors, they are
Yeah.
investing money in those companies. The kind of data that they will, if there is a road construction company, for example, if the company gets to build a road right across India from the length and breadth of India, the data that they are going to generate is immense. Is immense. So they will know, okay, this particular road can be used by the Indian military to reach the borders. So how to, what is the alignment, what is happening, uh, all sorts of data. What is the strength of the road? I mean, there is a grading of roads that happen. A road is graded based on the load that it can take. So there are certain roads which can take battle tanks, which can carry battle tanks. There are roads which some roads, if you see, they cannot bear the weight of the battle tank. So there are grades basically. So that kind of a data is being generated by these companies. So of course we talk about, we know 5G data. Fortunately, India has ensured that Huawei and ZTE is out of the 5G race in India. So it's pretty good. But the only uh, difficult point is BSNL and what do you call it? The government-owned telecom unit. Most of its equipment for 5G were bought from these two Chinese companies. So a major from ZTE and the lesser part from Huawei. So this kind of a very targeted influence operation is going on in terms of intelligence units. You might have read recently that in several cities across the world, uh, the Chinese government, the CCP, has set up a police unit.
Yeah.
There is quite a possibility that there is some police unit that already operates in India to
Under some cover.
to under some cover, exactly. So it could be operating in India. Probably they are closely watching these people for whatever reasons which I have enumerated earlier, for various influence operations, for even maybe bumping them off. Let us openly talk about it.
Yeah.
So based on the stand of the people, this can happen. So that sort of a threat is there because of the Chinese influence operation, particularly intelligence operatives working in India. uh, the Dalai Lama, he's being
Ah, big target.
majorly big target, majorly being observed. The Central Tibetan Administration leadership is being observed. Uh, so the threat is quite huge if you look at it. So from that angle, if you look at it, the threat is quite huge. So so
I want to
Himachal
ask
Pradesh is another state where greater focus is being put by the Chinese intelligence.
Arunachal, sir.
Yeah, Arunachal, of course. I mean, Arunachal is a state that they claim already. I'm talking about Himachal
Himachal.
Pradesh.
Okay, okay. Sorry, I think there was, we spoke together at that time. So I want to ask you about something with regards to intelligence. And you in your report have covered a couple of things. As a matter of fact, you've talked about uh, sort of a tech attack as well as other things on regards to AstraZeneca. You've spoken about a whole lot of other things with regards to the Nepalese, which is quite interesting to me because that's like a bulwark between both the countries, and if they're able to breach that wall, they'll have a strategic advantage, and that's something that one can realize. What my question to you is that, there is a certain element of negligence or not understanding the whole narrative of intelligence and how one can actually get spun into this game. A lot of people do get into it without realizing that they are actually getting into this sort of a thing. Is there something that you've identified, sir? Like, for example, I talk about China quite a bit, and I do get a lot of hate mail. Let me be very frank. Decent amount of hate mail. I get, my accounts get reported. By the way, it's happening right now as well. So my channel gets reported every time I target China. You'll find my views on that day goes up, and the next day there's a slump. So my channel gets reported, the videos get reported, and there's a, I mean, I'm a very small player in this game. What my question to you is that, is there also evidence of players unknowingly kind of helping out the Chinese effort? Because the narrative today in India, and I'm going to come back to the BBC, and sorry for taking a little while to kind of put my point across, sir. A lot of people who are of a certain relevance, and I don't want to say which sector of the market, they can be from defense, they can be from government, they can be from the opposition, this, that, and the other, knowing very well, and probably it's for an ulterior political motive, but just passing a statement on Twitter doesn't create anything. But still, you will find them questioning the banning of this particular documentary, right? So there is, and you see it in all sectors. So it's like sleeper cells suddenly have been switched on.
Yeah.
The question to you is that, do you find the Chinese have kind of been able to create assets within India rather than having their own people doing what they're doing, or is it, is it something like that?
No, they have created assets in India. I mean, we last time talked about a whole lot of institutions and individuals who have been influenced by various means. I mean, some of them might have fallen prey due to their naivety. That's a possibility. Naively, they might have gotten trapped by the Chinese. That is also a possibility.
Yeah,
We should not rule that out. But there are a whole lot of others who do it deliberately for monetary gain, like this
Naxals
Ravi
and the
Sharma.
so-called
Yeah,
lefties and Naxals. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah. See, we talked about, you raised this issue about Nepal. So Nepal is one of the important conduit routes for the operators to come in. Okay, now
Yeah.
that there is a communist government in Nepal, all the more reason that they are going to use that route to come in, and because it's what do you call it? It's an open border. You can just walk across. So that is how most of the people who are not supposed to be in India have been caught by the Indian law enforcement agencies
Yeah. Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the recent times. So lots and lots of reports are coming up now. So if you there is a need for some kind of a strong measure as far as the border with Nepal is concerned at this point in time. Okay, it's very important. Uh, and I mean, the Chinese have been targeting all our neighbors, especially, I mean, Pakistan is already in their hands. It is their handmaiden, that we know already. Now, Bangladesh, they are targeting. Myanmar, they are targeting. Nepal is again going to, it's already, I think, is going to be a handmaiden of the Chinese from now on. So, Nepal borders, we need to really take a look at. We need to see, maybe keep a watch on the Chinese movement and inside Nepal through our own network and assets that are available in Nepal at this point in time. So, in fact, there are reports which say that the Chinese have, deployed a whole lot of drone assets in Nepal to keep mapping the entire, the north region, the north borders that we have, using whatever they can do with the drones along the Nepalese border with India. So, I mean, they are using a whole lot of. There is also a report that they use the pigeons
Yeah.
for spying, in the sense that they tie a camera, switch it on, and then let it fly. So it just flies around Indian Army positions in and around the border and comes back to the base. So they gather intelligence from that sort also. This has been noticed by the Indian Army personnel along the borders on several occasions. So, I mean, if you look at it, I think they also have assets today, the anti-India assets in Nepal. They are creating assets in Nepal which work against India. They are creating similar assets in Myanmar, similar assets in Bangladesh also, and probably even Sri Lanka. They are doing this activity. I need to closely look at that. I've not looked at Sri Lanka in this aspect as yet. So, you know, there is one more thing that we need to understand. Gorkha are part and parcel of the Indian Army in a sizable number. So they are also good source of information. So they are also being targeted in Nepal. So they are also trying to create a, what do you call it, as an atmosphere, anti-India atmosphere among the Gorkha youth who generally want to come and join the Indian Army as a soldier. So they are even funding NGOs in Nepal uh, to create this kind of a campaign against the Indian Army, against India and Indian Army among the youth in Nepal, so that they don't come and join the Indian Army. So, in fact, the there are even I have even tracked some payment routes that have gone to the NGOs in Nepal through
Wow.
the Chinese embassy. So for this purpose, to ensure that there is an anti-India atmosphere in Nepal. So this sort of a same what do you call it, as a template is being used in other nations also, like uh, Myanmar and Bangladesh, to create a anti-India sentiment in those nations. So yeah, so this sort of a operation is going on.
Absolutely dangerous. But one thing that interests me today is the factor that there are, trade is a thing. And as a matter of fact, a couple of days ago, I did a show on this where I tried to explain that the trade that we are taking from China to a large extent is also beneficial to us with regards our own growth. But there are also sectors where the trade seems to be unnecessary. I mean, there are consumer items which could be sourced from other places. There are
Yeah,
hospitality sectors, I think one of the biggest culprits with regards to buying stuff from China, because we could see cutlery, crockery, and basically restaurant ware and stuff that goes in the rooms and all that coming in from there. And it's an interesting game when you see this. But what is the story of trades? From being cheap to having a no China sentiment within the country and still being able to influence the traders. How did this story begin, sir?
no, the thing is, as you rightly know, I mean, there is a joke that I read recently. So that if if an Indian looks at a product in, say, the West, like, say, for example, he goes to a Gucci shop, and he will not even visit that shop. He will won't even enter that shop. Whereas the Chinese will enter every day. They won't buy anything, but they will, when the shopkeeper is not looking, they will click a
Yeah,
picture and send it across back to China to make a fake item out of it and sell it to the Indian. So this was one of the jokes that I read somewhere
yeah.
recently.
This guy is their stand-up artist. I forget his name. Indian chap born in Canada who
Okay.
put this across. It's very interesting. Actually, it tells you the mentality. Very interesting jokes, sir.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, he said it as a joke, but it's actually true. The sentiment that comes out of that joke is actually true. So anything that is fast moving consumer good, then I think the Chinese take the advantage of the kind of leverage that the government provides them in terms of concessions and stuff like that to manufacture cheap and then dump them in India, in a nation like India where there is a huge market for this kind of stuff. I mean, there is another joke that I remember recently. I mean, uh, a politician, I think Nitin Gadkari was the one who mentioned it. He said that uh, maybe a couple of years back, he said it in some event where he was speaking. He said that Ganpati festival is a huge festival in Maharashtra. In the recent times, the Ganpati statues that were being bought by people, they had the Chinese, like, eyes.
Eyes. Okay.
So he said they were also, even the Ganpati statue and the idol is coming from China these days, and people are buying those idols and they're using them in their houses these days. So he was actually said it as a joke, but look at the kind of extent where the Indian market has been studied by the Chinese. So, and they have started making use of it and dumping stuff like, what you said, spoons and the cutlery and the small, all these consumer plastic items, plastic spoons, all these kind of nonsensical stuff are being dumped in India. So basically, they know that there is a huge volume market that exists in India. So these are the kind of goods that are fast moving. People use it. It breaks faster, so they will keep coming and buying and again and again. So I mean, recently you must have read what the trade situation is between even after the 2020 Ladakh conflict. Uh, it's grown by about 20% is what I read in the newspapers recently. That figure
19.6%.
may,
Yes.
yeah, some around 20% is what it's grown. That is shocking, actually. And the kind of stuff that the Indians are buying, the Indian
That is
traders
the
are
critical.
buying from, yeah, the kind of stuff that they're buying is, I mean, if you can't even manufacture it, what are you going to do for this nation? You know, and it's actually bad for your own trade, for your own, for your own survival. That these guys are not realizing. So you buy cheaper stuff, and if you start making use of it, it's, I mean, if you are relying on, say, for a pharmaceutical API or something like that, I can understand. So these are important stuff that are required for the
Buying sound
industry.
recorders,
Raw
then
material. Pardon?
if you're buying sound recorders, there's a problem.
Yeah, if you are buying this kind of stuff, then there is a problem. If you are getting raw material for use, then I can understand that too. Stuff that you are not able to make it in India, raw material that are not available in India,
Yeah.
then it's understandable. But you are buying, like, India is heavily dependent on China on a lot of stuff like electronics, furniture, bedding. I mean, if you're relying on China for furniture and bedding, it's shameful, actually.
Shameful.
So
Yes.
automotive parts. So if these kind of things, if India cannot manufacture mobile phones, why? I mean, can't we just create a manufacture a mobile phone of our own? Uh, I believe this situation needs to change. Probably uh, the government needs to act on certain policies in this regard. So not just the mobile apps that need to be banned, even Chinese mobile need to be banned. There is a security threat in that also. So yeah,
I'm happy to say today I bought a made in India mobile phone, sir. It's an iPhone, but it is sorry for that, but it was manufactured in India. So
in
I was
India,
happy for
yeah.
that, and I've been
So
waiting for this thing to happen so that I could just buy a made in India sort of a thing. Anyways, I digress. But there's also the influence operation which has gone into the traders, sir. It is
yeah,
it's a free market economy at the end of it. The traders are free to buy from wherever they feel like. The government can do a lot of things, but as a retaliation, you may also get hit. Now, how have the Chinese been able to actually get into that trading sector, which is not easy to infiltrate into? I mean, the trading sector sits in Gujarat, it sits in northern Maharashtra, it sits in Uttar Pradesh, it sits in South India, in Tamil Nadu, and in Karnataka. How have they been able to get into that market? And do you see a realization with regards to this particular practice happening within the trading community, sir?
yeah. I mean, if see, first there are two, three aspects to it. Let me just break it down one by one. First
Sir,
and foremost is the Chinese companies themselves. Chinese investments have happened in several. There are Chinese mobile phone companies that are there. There are Chinese investments in several, fintech and other companies. So there are other infrastructure companies that are working in India, which are Chinese companies basically. I mentioned about road laying, bridge laying, work, that sort of a work. So in all these places, including trade, certain trade uh, sectors, what they do is they post their own people as the head of the company. If they have a good investment, so and they have a control on that investments, then they post their own people uh, Chinese people in those positions. The other way of doing it is they find a person who will toe their line and appoint them, an Indian, and appoint them in such companies. So they also become members of the trade bodies that exist. For example, I'll tell you about this Indian Mobile Association, Internet and Mobile Association of India. So IAMAI, I think that is the name, short form of that association. That is filled with people who are Chinese agents, people who talk in favor of China, who talk in favor of Chinese mobile phones, who talk in favor of Chinese apps. So it's completely filled with those guys, and they keep lobbying the government. In fact, this 5G ban on Huawei and ZTE, these companies were lobbying for these two companies to be part of the 5G tender in India. So there are, I mean, Xiaomi's CEO was still talking in favor of, is obviously he's going to talk in favor of the Chinese apps and Chinese mobile phones in India when there was this boycott Chinese goods call that came in the wake of the Ladakh conflict. So these guys are openly doing it. I think probably the government needs to start investigating these guys, and probably needs to act against these guys for talking in favor of China when there is a huge conflict that is going on in the borders. So uh, so this kind of a thing, you know, it's really shameful actually and ridiculous that these kind of people are allowed to survive in India even today at this point in time.
Indeed. I mean, one could justify it saying that it happens all over the world, but I don't care about the rest of the world. I need to care about my own country. So
Absolutely.
that's one thing that I'd like to say. So normally I don't get into politics in on my channel, but we do see the Chinese being able to influence a certain segment of the politics, and especially the people in the left who um, literally refer to the Chinese Communist Party leader as their boss. And I've heard that out of leaders' mouths, so I'm not taking a third party reference or something like that. The issue about political subversion, and I'm going to use the word subversion, not influence, but subversion, is because, and that is a bit critical because when one looks at it, political subversion could actually lead to destabilization of the setup of India. And that to me is dangerous, sir. How do you see it?
See, before this 2020 Ladakh conflict happened, the Chinese Communist Party was making the biggest effort to influence each and every political party in India, whether it was a smaller party or a bigger party, they were trying to influence. We have all heard about this Indian National Congress's agreement with the Communist Party of China. We all know about it. People have read about it. It keep the political opponents of the Indian National Congress keep harping on it. So the public knows about it. But what the public doesn't know is the kind of uh,
Content.
subversive activities that the Communist Party in India does, whether it is the CPI or the CPM. So I have never seen them condemn even this Ladakh conflict. The Communist parties were blaming the Indian government
Yeah.
rather than the rather than blaming China or condemning the China's aggression on India. So the kind of statements that were being issued by say Prakash Karat or Sitaram Yechuri or D Raja or all these chaps were pro-China and anti-India. When there is an aggression, even if your ideology is the same, if there is an aggression that happens against your country, uh, if you don't stand up for your country, then what sort of a political party are you? You can't claim to be an Indian political party in that sense. So you need to claim yourself as another arm of the Communist Party of China.
China.
So yeah. So in fact, I remember. In fact, I've covered in my report also that some of the statements, some of the editorials that were written in the mouthpieces of these communist parties were in favor of China. They blamed the Indian government and the Indian army for what was happening in Ladakh. They were saying that the Indian army was the aggressor. So, and they were also talking about, the India should not antagonize China, and India should be friendly. You should try to resolve the issue in, in bilateral talks, as though the Chinese are too ready to come and talk with the Indian army or the Indian government on, settling these issues. I think I mentioned in your previous show also, the Chinese have not yet shared their perception of the LAC with the Indian army till date, or with in the border talks that is going on at the NSA level, National Security Advisor level. Indians are willing to do it. We are willing to say that this is the LAC, this is where the line exists. But the Chinese have not yet even once said that we are ready to show what is our perception of the LAC. There has to be a talking point, a starting point for your talks, border talks, right? You can't talk about your borders in the air. It has to be on the land, right? You have to mark the land before you can start talking. Okay, this is your perception, that is my claim. You give something here, I'll give something there. So there will be a give and take when you
Yeah.
really demarcate. So, so this kind of a claim that you should have a bilateral talk to settle your military matters, is it possible? Military matters cannot be settled in talk. It has to be settled in the battlefield. So that is the only way the border issue can be settled. So the communist parties have always, not just today, right from 1962 war, they have been anti-India, they have been against India, they have been against Indian interests. I have no sympathy for the Communist Party at all. They need to be completely, all of them should be put behind bars. That is my opinion. They are all gadar hai pura. So they need to be put behind bars. There is no second opinion on it. So, so if you look at the kind of influence operations that they have done, even on the with regard to the communist parties, there is a Vienna Convention where bilateral diplomacy related convention where it says that you are not supposed to influence local politics.
Hmm.
The host countries' politics. But here, the Communist Party is the one which welcomes the Chinese embassy representatives right into their headquarters. So they they call them to their what is the name of their bhavan? Some bhavan that they have. They invite them to their bhavans. They feast. They do all sorts of things of that sort. So similarly, the Congress Party, we all know what has happened. They already have a tie-up, and also the Congress Party thing. We should say when you talk about Congress Party, the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation has taken huge sums of money
Yeah.
from the embassy, the Chinese embassy in Delhi. So they've also done conducted tours where even some journalists have participated. They've went as a delegation of the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation to China. So I don't know what these journalists, what is the role as part of the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation. So this even in the BJP, if you look at before this 2020 Ladakh conflict, there have been serious effort by the Communist Party of China to gain influence in the BJP. So there were a lot of delegation level visits to
Yeah.
each other. There have been talks that have been happening, party to party talks, party to party ties. So they've been invited to attend their party conferences and issues like stuff like that. So conducted tours have also happened for the BJP delegation. So BJP's till 2020 they've been part of target by the Communist Party of China for gaining influence. The 2020 Ladakh conflict was the one which opened the eyes of the BJP to the threat that the Communist China poses to India, and since then they have snapped all ties with the Communist Party of China. So, I mean, so this is the kind of political influence that they try to back. Uh, In fact, you had told me that I should what I said in my conclusions. Uh, it has a political angle to it also.
Yeah.
So, looking at the larger picture, if you look at the entire larger picture, if the sort of influence operation, I have only touched 9 sectors, but there are other sectors also where the Chinese influence
Yeah,
operations
every
are
sector, sir.
going on at this point in time. So I have not looked at them till date. So I have to, when I come with my next report, probably we talk about other sectors also, including the defense sector, where a lot of defense Chinese influence operation has been happening, and a lot of foreign companies which are supplying goods to India, they have been targets of the Chinese. There are goods that they have supplied, there are equipment, defense equipment that they have supplied, which have Chinese parts. So, in fact, I remember in 2015 or 16, there was a Bloomberg News report which which talked about the U.S. Army finding out through their investigations that one particular supplier, major supplier, had bought equipment from China and supplied it to the U.S. Army. They bought it cheap from there and they supplied it to the U.S. Army. So even in India, I'm sure there are a lot of companies which are buying parts, systems, equipment
Yeah, yeah,
from
yeah.
Chinese, putting it on their system of systems and selling it to the Indian armed forces. So that is definitely happening. We'll have to cover that also one of the days. So what is the larger picture? The larger picture is that it's like a parasite. क्या बोलते हैं उसको जो वुड में there is a
Termite.
insect that comes in, termites. The term, it's like a termite. They start eating up your, your body. I mean, when I say the body, the Indian nation as such, they start nibbling and start eating in your insides, and at the end of the day, there will be nothing left except for your skeleton. So that is the kind of situation that this kind of operations can have. So especially in the political arena, they can easily influence the young minds in the universities and the academia. And if you have the Tukde gangs that you see in that we saw in JNU, in every university in in this country, so what will be the next generation? What will happen to this nation in when the present generation leaves this world and the new generation comes in?
Hmm.
So India wouldn't exist as it exists today. So that is the kind of sort of the larger picture threat that this poses. We have read about the U.S. elections being influenced by outside forces. By I mean, Russia was being blamed for it. All sorts of thing was done at that time. So here, it is a real present and clear and present danger exists in the form of Chinese influence operations in India, by which they can influence the elections in India. So they can actually undermine the democracy in India because they're anyways anti-democracy. They're anti-democratic. So they can do that. If that happens, so even the people who today talk about freedom of expression and free speech in India, they had it after that, after the Chinese have taken over this country.
Sir, these people are the first ones that they will target in case they are successful. The policy of takeover of a country is that the people that you use to take over the country are useful idiots and they need to be removed, because if they were sold to you, they could be sold to the opposition again. So that's something that people under the influence need to understand. I think there's an interesting comment which I'll just put up here. So Chinese-led civil drone components supplies, including critical ones. Chinese lead that, and they're also supplying maximum amount of these critical supplies to the Indian drone manufacturers as well. And that is a problem because Chinese have become so entrenched in the supply chain. Funnily speaking, you mentioned about the US Army. The US Air Force also found that its top line fighter, the F-35, had a major component in its wheel. It was an alloy of some kind that was bought from China. So there's a problem, and there's a problem, and there's just no question about it. So I think this has been a great conversation. Let's just take in some comments and some questions. Guys, before I do, please do like this video. This message needs to go far away. Please, and I'm sure by now all of you have found the link to Sir's paper. It's a 76-page long paper. It's a very interesting read. And it's also a place where a lot of us who are wanting to actually can do a little further digging into the subject. And, I'll be glad to kind of put that across to Sir as well and try and see if we can make some sense about it. Because at the end of it, it has to be a whole of nations approach to fight this out. We do see people getting caught for various little things around the place, for various little games. Now, before I get into the questions, guys, as I said, like the video, and for those of us who will be watching it later, please do ensure that you check your subscriptions. Make sure that you have the bell icon on so that you get the notifications. Sorry, I could not put a video out yesterday. I was traveling and some unforeseen circumstances. And if you do want to help out dev talks, there's a code right above me which you can scan, or you can just become a member or send us some super stickers or super chats. Thank you so much for watching. So a lot of people, and I'll take the first comment, which of course, I think the Indian government is typical haphazard way of functioning. In banning the documentary, it only publicized it. uh, to an extent, I do agree with it. There's no question, because people who want to watch it is still going to watch it. But to another extent, it also needs to be, there's a message, so which comes back to the initial part of our conversation of influence through media.
Adi, I
How
just want to interrupt for a minute here.
uh,
Whether the documentary is, it's not banned as of now. They only asked for it to be taken down from
taken down?
some of the social media posts. So that apart, what I want to mention is that since this is a documentary that can be used by the ecosystem against India, they will anyway use it, whether the Indian government bans it or not.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
so there is a problem with this documentary. Its credibility and the manner in which it has been done. So that is where the issue lies. It's not about whether the documentary is banned or if it is taken down or whatever. Even still, the ecosystem is going to spread it right across.
absolutely, sir.
So let's be very clear about it.
But there's a contrarian view that comes across who says, sir, that one documentary isn't going to do much. Think about the Ram Mandir. How long has it been a hanging fire? Still, we managed to attract FDI 30 years until the SC closed it.
Yeah, I wish I also can be called a documentary, but you know what is John Doe in legal terminology? John
Yeah.
Doe is a person who has not been identified till date.
Yeah, I think that's. I have not been able to identify him. I keep telling him to connect with me, but he doesn't. But he's a very,
Yeah,
very regular to Dev Talk. So, uh,
yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah. I
thanks
can
for
I
that.
can imagine the reasons. I can imagine the reasons. Yeah,
Yeah, a lot of people do. Yeah. So
yeah.
yesterday, Chennai-based
Yesterday,
CC, the Chennai-based CCP propaganda outlet published a report with some sources say, and many politicians as well as veterans have gone all guns blazing against the government. It's a democracy, I guess that's how it is.
see, I keep jocularly telling my journalist friends. I was a previously journalist, so I tell my friends that the people are willing to believe an unnamed source much more than the spokesperson. So this will continue because generally the government spokesperson do not have much credibility.
Yeah.
So unless the sources, I mean, I've worked in various media organizations. In some media organizations, they say that you need to mention at least the department where the information came out. Like say if you're reporting something on the finance, on the finance side, finance ministry policy matters, you say finance ministry officials said, or finance ministry, or if you're writing on defense, you should say defense ministry sources. If it is come from the police, you say the police said. You know, just saying that I got this information from a source, it has no credibility. Okay, we know a lot of stories, imaginative stories, which comes out of the blue of journalists We know about all that. So see,
The
and one more thing is that these kind of stories are written and reported for the purpose of making it viral.
Yep,
So
I was
I
just about to
I
say
don't know
that.
if I yeah, I don't know if I told this to you before onto your audience, but I keep telling it to others. There have been people who have asked me. See, I do go and take classes, for students and others on information warfare and stuff like that. So one of the questions that I frequently get from students is that how do we differentiate when we read a newspaper whether it is propaganda or whether it is information warfare or not? I tell them only one thumb rule. The thumb rule is, if the information is good for India, then trust the information. If the information is bad for India, it's propaganda. Don't trust it. it my thumb rule is that. So yeah. So I think your
Interestingly, sir,
audience can also.
we have a WhatsApp group on Dev Talks, and we were having a discussion about this petrol point report that came out that India has lost access to 26 of. Now, the funny thing is, we don't want to believe the guy in uniform who came out and said there's nothing of the sort. Don't worry. But some report that comes out in the Hindu and the NDTV, and this is the same NDTV that we keep abusing all the time, by the way, we are ready to believe it. And the worst part about the whole situation, and I'm going to say this very openly, the LAC, you've also mentioned it, the LAC, as per se, the Indian LAC, is known to very few people because it has been kept like that. There is a reason why it has been kept like that all these years. It's not now, it's been kept like that since the time of the 62 war and the agreements that came out thereafter.
Mm,
The problem is that we kind of want to believe anything negative and say, hey, dekho, this is what is happening. I told you so. What is this? Rather than say, okay, this has come out, let me read into it, let me investigate my own self, let me see what the armed forces have to say, let me see credible people within the society, what do they say? Because there are these funny characters even on Twitter. I mean, when you talk about armed forces, there are these funny characters which are there who have turned the hatred towards a particular person and a particular government into anything goes to score a little bit of a victory. The
yeah.
problem is that these are the people that are actually the targets of the Chinese. So we need to kind of identify, and taking from what you just said, that we need to identify, yeah, these are the places where a lot of propaganda does come in. So anything that comes from there, you got to investigate into it, you got to read into it, you got to figure this out before kind of starting to go bum 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 about it.
Yeah. In fact, this Ladakh conflict, 2020 Ladakh conflict, I remember, I was tracking some of the reports, newspaper reports by some journalists. It is quite easy to, identify what the source is. If you just keep, if you read 2, 3 news items of the particular journalist, you will know that the Chinese embassy has briefed him or
Yeah,
her on the Ladakh situation,
and
because
especially
that kind of an
Hindu,
information could have only come from the Chinese embassy.
especially Hindu, sir.
I don't. I'm not. I'm not naming. You have to go to my report to see the names. But but if you read the name of the reporter and
Yeah.
if you read the story, you will know that the source is the Chinese embassy.
Actually, I'll give a live example.
Yeah.
There are certain photographs that came out of a particular standoff, and
Mm.
that was only reported by the Hindu. And I spoke to a lot of people about it, and everybody said, yeah, there is no way that they could have accessed this. It has come from the
Yeah.
other side. So what you're saying is absolutely right, sir, and I absolutely agree with you. When one raises doubts about the dubious reports, I'm afraid it increases polarization in the society. How to stop this polarization? May I add, sir, isn't that the target of the Chinese influence?
It is the target of Chinese influence, or even the docu that has come out from BBC. I mean, the aim of doing it is to ensure that there is some unrest in the country. So that's the uh, basic aim of doing these kind of operations. How do you stop it? I said creating awareness is the one way of doing it. The government is doing whatever it can, but people, you know, rather question why did you ban this particular documentary when the government acts, right? So the government is already doing it, but I think it is not the government's role; it is the public's role. It is the people's role. I think I mentioned in your show last time that social media, the Indian youth, particularly those who are on social media, are very aware of what is happening. They are able to analyze and decide on their own, or completely they roast the people who are anti-India on social media that I've seen.
Yeah,
So if that kind of an awareness is created, probably these kind of anti anti-India forces will be silenced on social media everywhere. So that is possible and it will happen. Uh, I'm very confident about the Indian nation. I'm very confident, and I trust this the the intelligence and the smartness of Indians. दो डालेंगे in सबको, and they will ensure that this kind of a thing ends at one point in time. Maybe some fringe elements will continue to do it. Let them continue to do it. India is rising. There is no
no,
doubt about it. India is
absolutely.
rising, and lot of indications towards that globally. There are a lot of indications. See, just look at the example of Ukraine war. Every nation in the world wants India on their side, whether it is Ukraine or Russia or the US or all the European nations. They want
Yeah,
India on their side. Why is India not condemning Russia? They will ask this question. That is because they want India on their side. So there are clear indications uh, that India is on the rise, and nobody can stop it anymore. Even Chinese cannot stop it. They are making
actually,
all their efforts, but they can't.
John has a very interesting this thing. So that's the thing. The left is global and the right is only local.
See, that's a very
That's
good comment.
actually
That's a very good comment. But let me tell you something very important. We should understand this. I actually I want to refrain from talking politics, but your readers, your viewers are forcing me to talk politics. The person who's going trying to unite India through a walk, he claims that but he's actually forgetting that he's not talking about the local population who are going to vote for you. If you're going to antagonize your own people, are they going to go and vote for you? So the right is correct. They are local and they are on the correct path. You have to be local. There is no doubt about it. Okay. So think for your own people, then obviously the global will also come your way. There is no,
absolutely,
you don't have to worry
absolutely,
about it. Take care of your locals. The globals will also come to you.
absolutely.
Simple. Yeah.
Is there a physical threat to the Dalai Lama? Eliminate him and ensure the succession in Chinese authorized areas. Well,
Of course there is a threat. इसमें doubt क्या है?
but
There is
it's
a
not
threat.
about
There is a threat.
control of the authorized areas. It's about basically the legitimacy of the Tibetan, the Buddhist control that the Chinese have.
Exactly, exactly. See, that is why, see, Dalai Lama is a very wise person. His Holiness is a very wise man. That is why he separated his political role and his religious role.
Yeah, there's
Okay,
a
he was
reason.
very, very. There is a huge, big reason behind it. So he clearly demarcated his political role and his religious role. Okay, so there is a threat. Yes, there is no doubt
Absolutely.
about it.
So General Rajiv Narayan, who's with us, says external subversion in our immediate neighborhood to support and strengthen internal subversion. That's a
Yeah,
strong.
yeah. I mean, he talks about the Indian neighborhood. Indian neighborhood is a major focus of the Chinese influence operation. We have talked about Nepal. We have talked about Bangladesh. We have talked about Myanmar in our discussions till now. So, of course, Pakistan. Already said that it's a lapdog of the Chinese. So there is no doubt about it. So even in Maldives, this kind of an effort was on. Of course, Sri Lanka, that effort has been on for a very long time. So uh, all this can. have an impact in the internal what do you call the matrix of India also. It is quite a possibility. I agree with him completely on that.
The issue that I see, sir, and if I may just take a half a minute, is that and we've done a show on this also, that India's wings on fire. You look at our neighborhood, Pakistan. I mean, it shudders me to think if Pakistan breaks up, what happens. I'm scared of it. Nepal, we've discussed. Bhutan, they're having some talks with China, and uh, Chinese have extreme territory demands from them. Myanmar is in the fritz. Sri Lanka, as long as Sheikh Hasina is there, it's stable. I can't say beyond.
Bangladesh.
Sorry, Bangladesh. Sri Lanka, I think we've been able to kind of scape through and get some influence over there to kind of stabilize things towards our side. But they're a tenuous population. They need stuff. So it's damn difficult to kind of say कि भाई अब ये they're all with us, and there's not going to be um, you know it's not going to be pure uh, clean way for us in Sri Lanka as well. So there's
See,
it's
at
very
this point in time, there is a huge strategic tussle going on uh, in Nepal, in Sri Lanka, in Myanmar for influence. Who's going to have influence on these nations? How to move them to your side? This tussle is currently on, and all means are being adopted by the Chinese to ensure that they are on their side and not and against India.
Hmm.
So that effort is on. Of course, you mentioned about Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka circumstances were such that they had to rely on India for some kind of a help, and they also know that India is the only one which can help them at that point in time. So we were able to ward off the kind of influence that the Chinese have, but they still have influence there at this point in time. The threat has not subsided as far as the Chinese operations in Sri Lanka is concerned. Influence operations in Sri Lanka is concerned.
So Elon Musk is said to have some nexus with the CCP, and that's why he's unwilling to start production in India. Is it true?
I'm sorry, I've not looked into that aspect of it, so I may not be able to answer this question. I've not looked into it, so I cannot claim to know everything. So
I
I
have
just
a small insight into this. Elon Musk some time ago said he put out a thing that Ukraine has lost a war and they need to kind of give out these areas to Russia, and Russia needs to have a fair plebiscite and make sure that it's legitimate their takeover and stuff like that. And then the next day he put out this thing that you know. So the reaction to this was the Chinese were very upset. They said, "Yeah, he's going out of hand. China and Russia today are pretty close by." So they said, "No, no, no."
mm,
Some Chinese lower end individuals put out a lot of hate for him on Twitter. And a couple of days later, he puts out, "No, no, Taiwan is part of China." Now the best thing is that two of his cars that were stuck for government approvals got cleared the very same day.
okay.
So Elon Musk, for all that he talks about, he's a great genius, but he's a businessman. Remember that. There's wherever there's money, he'll go. And I find the whole, and I've done a show on this also, the whole Twitter purchase to be a little, I don't know, it doesn't go down my throat that very easy. Although we've not seen anything happening as of now, so I can't substantiate what I say. Is just this, nagging feeling that I have. But I'm open
What is the
to,
business actually on Twitter? Yes. What is the business sense?
yeah, I'm open to criticism
It
on that.
doesn't make any business sense actually. Yeah.
So I don't know, but it's that gut feeling that you get there's something wrong here. There's something wrong,
Yeah.
and we'll probably get to see it a little further. And I think it's going to come in 2024 when America as well as India are going to go through elections. So we're going to have these attacks coming to our way more often. Last couple of questions, sir. We'll take. We know that in case of a war, enemy can freely influence the population, and there is no firewall that secures the Indian population.
Yeah, I think that is what we have been discussing uh, through the
I think he's
two shows
mentioning
that we
the
have done.
internet firewall, sir, like the Chinese have,
Internet firewall. Okay.
So the influence
Yeah.
operation through,
Now, being a democracy, there are certain issues that we have.
yeah,
We cannot act like the authoritarian Chinese regime. Um, so, India, inherently being a democracy, there are certain problems, but we have to live with it. So, but this is the best model. Democracy is the best model, so that we can have deaf talks and stuff like that. Otherwise, it won't be possible.
10 years ago it wouldn't have been possible at all, sir. So let
Yeah,
me just
even
let that
10
go.
years ago, it would have been possible.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I normally don't, comment on politics, but
10 years
this,
ago, my even my report wouldn't have been possible.
yeah, there would have been quite a bit of challenge in that. So, you know, there are so many questions about the BBC documentary, and I want to put this across, guys. The only reason I brought up the BBC documentary is not because I want to discuss the BBC documentary. It's because it's an example of media operations. The Chinese have a three warfare strategy that Sir had actually brought out in the last discussion. Also, it's psychological, media, and legal. So media is a big part of what they do, and a lot of people suspect, even including myself, that there's a Pakistani hand to this BBC game somewhere. All this costs money. Money comes from China.
Yeah.
So there's a connection, and if they can do it with the BBC, they'll do it with other people.
Yeah.
That's the
In
reason I
fact,
want to bring up, sir.
correct. In fact, you mentioned about this legal thing. I think we did not discuss it much. We only made a passing reference last time.
Yes,
If you look at all the Chinese companies, companies which are owned by China, which are operating in India, Chinese invested companies, all these organizations, trade organizations that we mentioned, which have a major Chinese influence, all of them pay huge packages to lawyers, advocates to represent and defend them in the court of law. Okay, so you know, in fact, lots and lots of firms, big law firms in India are again part of this racket, where they
absolutely.
make a lot of money and represent the interests of China in India, the legal interests of China. So that is one of the warfare strategies that they adopt. So, in fact, recently in one of the cases involving a Chinese thing, Abhishek Manu, I mean, there's an appreciation that I'm expressing. Mr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi and Mr. Mukul Rohatgi, they refused to appear for those companies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I mean, I really hats off to them for that. This kind of a stand, brave stand they need to take. And probably the legal fraternity, which is my own fraternity,
Yeah.
need to rethink on their interests. Whether if India doesn't survive, then your legal profession also doesn't survive. So they should know that.
Indeed, sir. As a matter of fact, guys, you should go back to the Twitter case in America. We're the only country in the world that has been successfully been able to ban Twitter. The Americans did it for 2 days, and the Supreme Court said no, switched on. First Amendment,
Yeah,
freedom of speech,
yeah,
and they had to. So it's something, you know something to think about. Last two comments, sir, and these are just some statements. India is the chair of SEO G20. It's an election year. Be open season on India this year. Brace for it.
yeah. We we have to be watchful of everything that is happening around us at this point in time. Election year, yes. We already talked about the kind of influence operations that China can do, and they can influence the outcomes in the elections, which is a huge danger for India's democracy. So I think we need to be watchful of that.
And Mandar says very rightly, legal fraternity needs to be weaponized. Not, I wouldn't say weaponized. I think it needs to be made aware of this kind of thing, which is, which Sir is
Yeah,
mentioning about.
probably he's saying that the legal fraternity is being weaponized against India, and probably, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to second guess what he wants to say here, but Yeah, if it is being weaponized against India, probably the legal fraternity needs to uh, sit up and take note of it and ensure that they do not get caught up in that kind of legal warfare that
Yeah,
the
yeah,
communist China indulges against India, against Indian interests.
absolutely, absolutely. So I think this is, see, I in closing, I'd just like to say something that you've brought out, and the report that you've written, I've kind of read it two times now because I've been also
Okay.
trying to just nibble around. I pick up something that you've written and I try and get into it whenever I have time to figure out some little detail about here and there if I can pick up, because it's, some things interest someone and you want to know a little more about it, because, and that's the thing that I want to put across with the show, is that we need to understand this thing, is that the Chinese may not fight us on the border, but this is the Chinese war, and that has been brought out very, very clearly by Sir. And thank you so much, Sir. This has been a very educative episode. On the Chinese influence operations, we've spoken about the media, and we've spoken about those 9 sectors, and we've covered a little more around the place as well. As I said, the BBC is a great example of how narratives can be built, and the Chinese war is at the end of it here rather than in anywhere else. So it's something that we as Indians need to understand, that each day when we open and consume a certain content, if it does not have the right narrative, which and which is not a very India standing narrative, you should kind of take it with a pinch of salt and see what's the background of the person who's giving this particular information. Where is it coming from? What are his sources? Why is he doing what he's doing? And who are the kind of people that are following them? So there's I mean, I'm very, very careful of the content I consume, sir, because especially after the Ukraine war, you can get influenced like that, and
Yeah.
your feed will be filled up with pro-Ukrainian stuff. If you want to take a balanced approach, then you need to keep the propaganda away. And I do it both ends. So I listen and read very, very few people who I know have given a very balanced perspective. This thing, and that's a lesson that we can all learn. So before we fall into a trap of BBC, or I guess all of us will remember that cartoon that had been put up by the Chinese, of the rocket firing on one side. That's what they were doing, and fires burning in India. Sadly, uh, it's there were deaths at that time, but not the way that it's been projected. And that's how it is. A picture speaks 1,000 words. So there's a comment that I'm going to take up from a very regular viewer of ours. Our history has a number of examples where the doors are always opened from the inside.
Yeah, this is what we have been talking about. No? The fifth columnists
Yeah,
were inside India. The termites were eating from inside India. So we are talking about them. The entire report is about that. The entire influence operation is based on the strength that communist China acquires from these kind of people who can open the doors from inside, people who can, eat away the Indian body. Uh, you know, so it's it's a perception battle, and there are a lot of people who have become tools, or as one of your viewers put it, all of them have been weaponized against India. So that is what we are seeing. And since the last show, we have been talking about how you need not have to fight a war in the borders or in a battlefield. The battlefield has shifted now. The paradigm has shifted. It's shifted to the perception domain. It's shifted to the information warfare domain. It has shifted to the economic warfare domain. So what we have covered in the report, the 9 sectors, are all about the warfare, perception warfare,
narratives.
narratives. This is all about that. So the entire report is about that. So we are touching upon the domain of warfare that the Chinese are indulging in at this point in time. So unless the people wake up, the people of India wake up to these threats, unless they are made aware of these threats, the threat will persist. Rather, it will sustain itself and maybe even grow. this effort from my side and from Adi's side and everybody's and all our mentors and guides who are helping us in our work is to make people aware so that this threat is mitigated and maybe even eliminated at some point in time in the future. That is a possibility. I have great hopes. I mentioned earlier also, I completely trust the intelligence and the smartness of the Indian public, Indian youth. They are very good at you know uh, separating the chaff from the grain. So there is no I have no doubts at all on that. So we have a bright future. India has a bright future. India is rising, and Indians are rising. There is no doubt about it.
On that note, sir, thank you so much, and hope to see you back with your brand new report very very soon, sir, so that we can take this
We, we,
discussion
yes, we are
forward and
working towards it.
yeah, let's do that, sir. And you know, to the audience, guys, please put in your comments and please put in like this video. Put in your thoughts within the comment section so that we can build up this discussion. If there's something that more you'd like to us to cover, of course, there's a whole lot more that needs to be covered, but it's something in specific within this frame of these 9-10 subjects that we picked up. We'll be glad to come back with sir and do another show on it so that we can actually dwell into a little more detail. Media being one of the biggest things that we need to be careful of. Thank you so much, sir. Till next time, Jai Hind, sir.
Thank you so much, Adi. Thanks for this opportunity, and thanks to your audience, your viewers who have been actively engaging in the discussion. And I thank them. I salute them for their interest in the subject and for also being a vehicle to make this report go viral and also ensuring that basically I put it out without any copyright or nothing. Anybody can use it, but only the request is that please mention the source of this information, that is Law and Society Alliance, which has prepared this report. That is my only request. Please use it, quote it, mention it, do whatever you want, and so that the awareness among the general public of India increases on the threat that India faces and how to cope up with it. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.